Hello, and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. It is week 11, and the New York Jets are back home to face the Indianapolis Colts in a week 11 showdown between the 3-7 Jets and the 4-6 Colts, both teams who have seen some struggles this season. Today, to break down all angles of this matchup, we are joined by Colts analyst Derek Larger. Derek, thanks so much for coming on. How's it going, man?
Oh, not too bad. I actually got some great news today that, the Indianapolis Colts are actually going back to Anthony Richardson for the remainder of the season. Whether or not I trust Shane Steichen on that, I don't know because they've been up back and forth with this a lot, but feels good now to be an Indianapolis Colts fan knowing that that's what they should have done from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's definitely been a wild ride from a Colts perspective this year. And that's where I kind of just wanted to start. You just mentioned Shane Steichen there. Some questions around him, some of the decision making, of course. Just what have been your overall thoughts on the Colts so far this season? Obviously, sitting at 4-6. And then, two, just some thoughts that you might have as well on the Jets from an outside a fan perspective as well.
Yeah, honestly, I think that the Jets and the Indianapolis Colts right now are kind of very similar in some ways. Mainly like how the offense seems to have all this talent that you're like, how is it possible that this talent just seems to never know how to like gel together?
Yeah.
So I feel that from both from a Jets and from a Colts standpoint. And a lot of that points to, coaching and game planning, how that stuff works. Obviously, with you guys, I feel like Aaron Rodgers is almost always accustomed to doing things his way. Especially with the fact that you're going to be a bona fide Hall of Famer one day,
Yeah.
you get to act like that, you get to be like that.
Mhm.
But for Indy, it's different. The coaching has not really been great this year. And it feels like a massive step backwards. Because last year you saw Shane Steichen lead a Gardner Minshew led offense
Yeah.
to a 9-8 record. I mean, we were far from a great offense, but last year we were like, I think the 13th or 14th overall rated offense. So like, it's not like we were bad at all. Like we were able to do some things even with Gardner Minshew. So I've been shocked at the fact that, Steichen hasn't, gotten more out of Anthony Richardson. And I'm also truly shocked of, when Joe Flacco finally started taking over, just how much worse the offense got with him out there. So, I mean, it has definitely been a step backwards for a lot of us in, how good Steichen has been at leading this team into the direction that we wanted to go. I don't think the faith is truly fully gone with Steichen. I know some people are ready to fully say this guy needs to be gone at this point. I don't know if I'm quite there yet. I think some other people in the building need to go after this year, but I'm willing to give Steichen another chance as long as he can show me that, he could start getting Anthony Richardson more in sync with this offense.
Yeah, and you just mentioned Anthony Richardson there. Obviously, you also talked about Flacco. Took over the last couple weeks with Richardson being benched. Then you hear the news today Richardson will be back out there on Sunday. What was your whole thoughts on the original benching and where we are now with Richardson taking back over as the starter? And I guess just the rest of the way, do you feel that benching will help him? Do you expect him to make progress after what was a bumpy start? Where do you stand with the Richardson and just the whole quarterback situation heading into this one?
I don't know, man, because like the rest of us Colts fans, we don't really know why Anthony Richardson was benched.
Yep.
Like we really don't know. Like the Colts said, because the immediate story was he tapped out for one play during the Houston game.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, guys came out after the game and said, oh, that's not okay. That's not something you should do. Then the national media started taking that story and saying, this is an abomination from Anthony Richardson. And then the next day, Steichen benches him. And immediately that's what you think is, oh, he's getting benched as a punishment for what he did and needs to learn to not do that. But they said that had nothing to do with it. They said it had everything to do with performance. And I looked at that and I laughed because I'm like, that simply cannot be true. I mean, if you're going to bench anyone for lack of accountability on their performances, I could have named a bunch of guys from that Houston game offensively that you should have benched as well. But apparently you're not, just because, they're getting paid more money than Anthony Richardson is right now. But I mean, I didn't agree with the benching. I thought that the whole tap out thing could have been handled a lot better. One of my friends, Jason Spears, who also does a Colts podcast, said something that I agreed with. I thought that Steichen should have, immediately when Anthony Richardson took himself out of the game, should have pulled him to the side, asked him why he did it, and then when he told him that he was tired, then he should have sat him for the remainder of the game. That should have been his punishment. Nip that right there and then you move on. But, I mean, even after that tap out situation and the drive ended the next play because it was a 3rd and 26, after that ended, the Colts went down and scored a touchdown on the next drive. So, I mean, this whole, Anthony Richardson lost the locker room talk is just utter nonsense because they went out and scored the very next drive. So it's not like Anthony Richardson couldn't do it after that point. I just felt that they were very vague in how they approached this situation, and it left Colts fans and national media wondering, why are they doing this? Like, were they doing it because he wasn't looking good? Was it because, of the tap out? Was it because he was like maturity wise and professionalism wise wasn't there? Like, we had all these different theories, and then now he's coming back, and then you're like, well, maybe surely they'll answer, why are they starting him now? They said, no, it's just because of the process that they had. That's what you heard Steichen say over the last 3 weeks. It's a process. It's a process. It's a process. We don't know what that process is, but we're seeing it now. And apparently Anthony Richardson has now gone through the process enough that they feel confident to start him again.
Yeah, definitely a wild situation for sure. Something that's interesting. I just want to get some a little bit more thoughts here before we move on to the rest of this Colts team going into Sunday. Do you still believe in him to be the future option? I guess, where are Colts fans and obviously the national media? It's been a big story, but where are other Colts fans as well, and yourself included, on just his play as a whole and how that could translate to the future? Is he the guy you believe, or is this something that's kind of just a week by week basis? See how the rest of this year plays out.
Well, I mean, the problem that you have is you have a situation where you're asking, let alone American citizens, but you're asking football fans to be patient on something.
Yeah.
And that is something that no one is when they're a football fan. Is patience is not a virtue. So you want Anthony Richardson and the Indianapolis Colts to be really good right now. And, it's a tough pill to swallow. I have had to do that too, because at the beginning of the season, I saw what he did in 2023. And I know it was an extremely small sample size, but he was doing things that made you just go, wow. I mean, this kid has something special in him. And I thought he was going to unlock it this year. I truly thought he was. And then the inconsistencies have been, off the charts in a lot of different ways. I feel like the offense hasn't done him any favors. The game planning hasn't done him any favors. They're trying to make him more into a pocket passer than what he actually is. No doubt that there is a lot of things that Anthony Richardson needs to continue to get better at. And the biggest thing is consistency. If he can consistently start hitting more targets, and these wide receivers can start executing by catching some of the passes that he does throw efficiently, then we're going to start seeing this Indianapolis Colts team start to take a different direction. I mean, the best way I look at it, and it's been a comp that everyone's been saying this year, he's like Josh Allen. I mean, Josh Allen, through his first 10 starts, him and Anthony Richardson are practically identical. I mean, their numbers are practically identical. Honestly, Josh Allen in some areas was actually way worse than Anthony Richardson with turning the ball over and whatnot. So, I mean, the problem is you got this kid who is 10 starts into his NFL career, and he had 20 starts in his high school and college career before actually coming into the league. So this is an extremely inexperienced and young quarterback. And I've sat here and I've said this. If he doesn't show improvement by the end of next season, then yes, I will start to say, okay, maybe it's time that we, reevaluate this. I don't know if this is going in the direction that we need him to go, because you can't give up on it right away. If Bills fans had given up on Josh Allen after his first 10 starts, they wouldn't be in a position to possibly win the Super Bowl every single year, right? Or at least contend for it, right? So we don't know. No one knows with Anthony Richardson yet. And, we've had a lot of issues with how the staff has handled him, with how the team has handled him. All in all, I think it's just way too early to tell. I hope he is the future for this team, but I mean, I don't know, we just gotta wait and hope that the Indianapolis Colts can continue to develop him. And if we don't start seeing something at some point next year, then I start to question it.
Yeah, 100%. As you mentioned, the couple games he played last year early in the year looked great. And if he can start to show more of that consistently here, definitely something that I think Colts fans should be optimistic about if they start to see that again. Now, I want to get into a guy that is really just talk about trying to find consistency with Richardson. Jonathan Taylor, been one of the elite running backs in the NFL over the last couple seasons. Comes into this game against a Jets rush defense that is 25th in the NFL, not having a good year at all. 8 of their 10 games this season, they've allowed at least 110 or more rushing yards. So definitely been a problem. Jonathan Taylor this season, despite there being, a couple weeks where maybe yards per attempt wise wasn't quite there, still this season has 616 yards, has 4 games this year in the 7 games he's played with over 100 yards. Just what have you seen from Jonathan Taylor, and what does he bring to the table every week? Obviously one of the premier backs in this league.
Yeah, I mean, you said he's definitely one of the best backs in the league. And, when he's healthy and, he's out there, he is a threat every single time when he touches the ball. And, defenses always have to take accountability on that. They always have to load boxes. They always got to keep guys up front, because even with the fact that the Indianapolis Colts have a whole bunch of rookies right now playing on that front because of some of the injuries that they've had, this is still one of the better offensive lines in the NFL as well. So that, mixed with just how patient Jonathan Taylor is with his running ability, it makes it so much better. I'm more excited now to watch Jonathan Taylor going into this next few games with Anthony Richardson back at quarterback now, rather than Joe Flacco. I know that last week, Jonathan Taylor had 114 rushing yards last week, which you look at the box score and you're like, oh, wow, that's great. 21 rushes, 114 yards, a little over 5 yards a carry. Almost half those yards came off of one run. So if you talk about the other 20 rushes for 60 yards, that's not good. I mean, averaging barely 3 yards a carry, not even. So that definitely isn't good enough. And I have said this, when Joe Flacco's the quarterback, the run game seems to struggle. It really does. Outside of that one big run from Jonathan Taylor, he was stonewalled for the majority of the time, because there's no choreographing it. If you run RPOs with Joe Flacco, nobody is buying that he's running. So you buy it with Anthony Richardson, though. Those linebackers have to respect for a half second that Anthony Richardson might take this and hold it. And if they don't respect it, then Anthony Richardson's got himself an easy first down. And if they do respect it, gives Jonathan Taylor that split second to be able to figure out where he wants to go on that line as long as everyone has their blocks. So I'm very excited to see how that continues to improve for Jonathan Taylor. He hasn't had, a ton of games this year where he has gone off for explosive plays or, vast amounts of yardage. But when you look at when Anthony Richardson's on the field versus when Joe Flacco is, he's averaging at least an extra yard per carry when he actually has that. So I'm very excited to see Jonathan Taylor with Anthony Richardson back. And yeah, I can't wait to see what he's got.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, Flacco's just a complete statue in the pocket. So nobody's 100% not butting for that. Somebody, I know you've watched him, but somebody else, with the Jets couldn't move. So that's not surprising there at all. I want to move on here to some of the Colts wide receivers. Michael Pittman obviously was banged up last week. Potentially could be back this week. And then just some of the other guys, Alec Pierce, of course, Josh Downs, the rookie out of Texas, who I really like coming out of the draft. A.D. Mitchell is a potential target for the Jets. He had a big week last week, kind of his first big game with Pittman out. What have been your thoughts on this receiving core, who have also dealt with some just as much as Jonathan Taylor and these other guys are impacted with the quarterback change they are as well? What have you seen from them with the change of that quarterback as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's been inconsistencies from, them along with the quarterback problems. I mean, no doubt that it has been a struggle to kind of figure out a rhythm in some way. And clearly the wide receivers haven't been in rhythm with the quarterbacks, whichever quarterback it is. There really hasn't been much. Maybe it's been a little bit better with Joe Flacco in some games, but nevertheless, it really hasn't translated to much. Michael Pittman has been dealing with an injury of most of this year, and it has really affected him in a lot of different ways. I kind of wish that the Colts would just keep him out for a few weeks. I don't know what he dislocated. There's something going on in his back that he's going through pain to have to try to play through it. And I respect the toughness, but if you're slipping on routes all the time, and if you're not running these routes 100% and you're not able to gain separation, you're not doing anybody any good by trying to act tough. All you're doing is taking snaps away from a young kid like A.D. Mitchell, who actually can get separation, can run those routes at 100% and get himself open. I love and respect Michael Pittman. I just feel like the Colts should do him the favor and the courtesy of sitting him for a couple weeks to allow that back to rest up a little bit, so that when he comes back in around a month's time, he would feel so much better and help the Colts to, be able to have an offense that they can look forward to. But who knows whether or not he's going to play. Alec Pierce, I mean, he is so hot and cold. Some weeks he never gets targeted. Some weeks he gets targeted some of the most of anyone, and he is the deep threat. I mean, if Anthony Richardson wants to just throw a 60-yarder down the field to wherever he is, I mean, Alec Pierce is going to come down with it if he gives him a chance. Best wide receiver on this team right now, Josh Downs. Josh Downs is just an absolutely great slot wide receiver. Has amazing route running, tremendous feet, really good hands. And, he just knows how to get open, and his body control is insane too. He plays bigger than he is. He's only 5'9", but yeah, he plays like your typical 6'1" wide receiver. So, I mean, Josh Downs has had a lot of great moments with Anthony Richardson in their young careers to start. So yeah, I don't know who in particular will be, a big impact for this game specifically. I will say the last time Anthony Richardson did play, I mean, Josh Downs went off. I mean, Josh Downs had 4 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown, and almost had 2. So, I think that if I'm a betting man, I mean, Josh Downs is going to continue to see a
Yeah.
lot more targets.
Yeah, 100% agree there. Once again, we're talking to Derek Larger, Colts analyst here, getting the Colts perspective on this Week 11 showdown. Want to move now to the defensive side of the football. First, what have been your overall impressions on this defense? And one guy I want to kind of get into right away here, Zaire Franklin, has finished top 5 in tackles each of the last 2 seasons, leads the league this year in tackles with 105. Feels like one of the core pieces to this defense. What have you seen from him again this season?
Yeah, I mean, Zaire Franklin, I mean, what a tremendous guy, just a leader and somebody that just it plays with his freaking heart. And you're right. I mean, you don't lead the NFL in tackles, 3 straight years in a row without one knowing what you're doing and 3 actually loving what you're doing too.
Yeah.
So no doubt that the Colts really lucked out with Zaire Franklin. I mean, this was a 7th round guy out of Syracuse and, was a special teamer for the first 3 or 4 years of him in Indianapolis. So, I mean, never in our wildest dreams would we have thought that this guy would, become one of the best linebackers in the NFL. And we just had him sitting as a special teams guy this whole time. So, yeah, I mean, Zaire Franklin is one of a kind. As far as the whole defense, I'll tell you what, my feelings of it has changed over the last 4 weeks in comparison to what it was through the first 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw this stat at you because I love throwing this stat to everyone that I talk to every week just to see their reaction because this is truly remarkable. In the first 2 games for the Indianapolis Colts, they gave up a total of 475 rushing yards in the first 2 weeks. 475. That was 75 more than the second worst team in the NFL at that time, which was the Carolina Panthers, who were giving up 200 a game, and we were giving up 200 and almost 40 a game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it started badly. I mean, we were terrible. There's a reason why we were losing was because, the Texans ran for 212 yards against us. And then the Green Bay Packers the next week ran for 260. So, I mean, it was a dumpster fire to start. Now, obviously the Indianapolis Colts are still not a great defense at stopping the run, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was to start the year. The defense too, in the last 4 games, we're actually the 12th best defense at points per game. So teams are moving down the field on the Indianapolis Colts, but the Indianapolis Colts are a bend but don't break defense. They do a great job of holding their ground even when they're in the red zone, forcing turnovers, forcing 3-pointers rather than getting touchdowns. Like they do such a great job of just not giving up the big plays. They're making teams actually work for the yards that they're getting, which I have a feeling, that's what the Jets are going to do. But, the Jets, they do make a lot of mistakes. And, the Indianapolis Colts defense has gotten a lot better at that recently, at forcing turnovers. And that could very well come in handy for this matchup.
Yeah, that stat was wild. And here I thought the Jets run defense had it's going through a rough stretch, but definitely crazy numbers there. I want to get to one of the better players at his position, really, and that's Kenny Moore. Obviously, one of the better nickels in the NFL. Had a really good game last week. Had the pick, couple passes defended against the Bills and Josh Allen. What have you seen from him? And even too from a Jets perspective, Michael Carter's dealing with an injury, but one of the other better nickels in the NFL became the highest paid nickel actually in the offseason, right before the season began during training camp. But just what does Kenny Moore bring to the table week in and week out? One of the best at his position.
Oh, I mean, his contribution to this team cannot be understated at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is truly a remarkable person, a captain, and a player in general. I mean, it's funny because he he is one of those rare instances where Chris Ballard, our GM, went against his like motto of how he drafts or brings in players at certain positions. He has this idea of, you're at certain positions, your guys need to be this height, this measurable, this, and this, and this. Like they have to be this in order to do that. Like there's a reason why the Indianapolis Colts have one of the tallest cornerback rooms in the NFL. Ballard does not like to bring in guys that are shorter than 6 feet tall, and
Yep.
It's kind of the new motto of the NFL now. You want corners that are taller or have those really long arms, right? Because, in order to be able to break up passes. Kenny Moore was the first guy that, Ballard went against his motto of how to do things. And, ever since Kenny Moore got here, he has been, if it wasn't for Darius Leonard coming into the scene the way that he did early when he got drafted, and if it wasn't for DeForest Buckner coming in right after, Kenny Moore might be the best and maybe most important player on our entire defense. I mean, he forces turnovers. He makes big plays. He makes tackles in the backfield. His football IQ is just off the charts. I mean, this guy just knows how to play the game of football, and it's why he got another big contract from Indianapolis this offseason, because it's a guy you just cannot afford to not have on your team. I know the whole nickel corner thing is kind of, some people like to use it as a notch against someone, but you're going up against anyone anyway. You're going up against some of the best at what you do. And when you're as good at it as Kenny Moore, I mean, he is definitely a great player, and I'm so glad he's on our team.
Yeah, I totally agree with that last part too. A lot of people do kind of undervalue the slot nickel position, but certainly one of the more important and, of course, underrated positions on the defense. Wanted to just kind of start to wrap things up here defensively for the Colts. You mentioned DeForest Buckner, of course, has been a big piece for them up front. What have been your impressions so far on their defensive line?
You talking about the Jets defensive line?
Colts.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it at the beginning, like with how bad the Colts were at stopping the run early in the year. I mean, obviously, I've had a really bad look at them. Over the last few weeks, it's gotten better. We were missing DeForest Buckner for a good chunk at the beginning of the year. He had to miss 5 weeks because of a severe ankle sprain. And I mean, I don't think DeForest Buckner has missed a game since being in Indianapolis, and he's been here since 2020. So if you're an Iron Man when you can go several years on a defensive line without missing games, and for him to go out the way that he did, I mean, that lets you know it was a pretty bad ankle injury. So I'm glad he's back, because his presence has been huge. They're figuring it out, and even Grover Stewart, who, in my opinion, is one of the best run-stuffing defensive tackles in the entire NFL, even he's getting into the action now of, getting sacks. I mean, against the Minnesota Vikings a few weeks back, he actually forced a strip sack on Sam Darnold, which ended up in a scoop and score by Kenny Moore for a touchdown. The only touchdown that the Indianapolis Colts actually scored in that game. So, the two big players for the Indianapolis Colts are still continuously doing what they do. They're really good at what they do. The rest of the guys, though, still haven't seen much production. Laiatu Latu, the rookie that we drafted out of UCLA, getting a lot of pressures. He just isn't quite getting home. It's a rookie thing. I'm glad he's at least getting the pressures, because it shows that he's getting in the quarterback space. So that'll come with time, but he's definitely not there yet. And it's been tough for the defensive line too, because the amount of injuries that you've had. I mean, like I said, DeForest Buckner had to miss 5 weeks at the beginning of the year. Samson Ebukam, who was your leading sack leader last year, went out in the second week of training camp, and he's been out for the entire season, may not return. And then Kwity Paye, your second best defensive end, he had to miss a couple weeks while DeForest Buckner was gone too. And then your fourth string, your second or third string defensive end, Tyquan Lewis, he also got sent to short-term IR at the same time DeForest Buckner did. So your defensive ends have been your fourth string guy in Laiatu Latu and your fifth string guy and Dio Adengbo, who kind of goes back and forth between defensive tackle and defensive end because of his skill set. So thank God for the depth of the defensive line, because otherwise it would be atrocious. But I mean, this defensive line has been battle tested, and I'm glad that we're starting to finally get back to being healthy. Really, the only guy that we're missing at this point, I think Tyquan Lewis is coming back here in a week or two. And you know, the only guy that we're really missing at this point is Ebukam, which I really wish that we had. But other than that, you know, I give them credit for at least trying to do what they can.
Yeah, 100%. And you named a lot of kind of under the radar guys there, some depth pieces. As we start to close things out here, are there any other guys that we haven't, touched upon yet on either offense or defense that you would look for here in this matchup?
Well, I wish that I could say that, that when it comes to the offense, anything other than Anthony Richardson, we talked about him and Jonathan Taylor, those are the two big ones. Kind of sucks that, this Anthony Richardson news is coming out now because, this game got flexed out of Sunday Night Football for the exact reason that we've seen what Joe Flacco has looked like now. And clearly this is not going to be a fun matchup, but I'm sure they would not have flexed it out had Anthony Richardson been the quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Even if he was looking bad, people still wanted to watch what Anthony Richardson could or couldn't do because he's box office. But ain't nobody want to see Joe Flacco anymore. Defensive wise, I'll tell you what, I am definitely interested to see what Jalen Jones and Samuel Womack do against Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. I'm very interested to see what this cornerback room can do against these guys. Clearly, you guys got some elite wide receivers and offensive talent out there. I'm interested to see how the defense really does against it. I know that it's been tough for the Jets to kind of, get anything going, which is so weird because, against Houston, sure, the offense wasn't elite, but they looked like they maybe finally found a little something that might get them going. And then this last week, lay a goose egg against the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know. I feel like we're going to see a pissed off Jets offense that's going to want to try to prove something here, but I'm interested to see how this defense handles the challenge.
Yeah, 100%. It's been just such a bumpy road. Lots of talent on this team, but poor coaching and very inconsistent play all around has kind of gotten where we are 3-7. And I totally agree with the whole primetime thing. I think America is kind of sick of the Jets on primetime, not doing a whole lot. I mean, they did beat the Texans, but the first half, there's probably a lot of people that turned that game off, especially on Halloween. And not many people in America probably wanted to watch Joe Flacco either. So definitely both parties probably involved in that decision. But to close things out here, really appreciate you coming on. It was great talking all things Jets Colts in this matchup. Where can everybody find all your stuff, your social media, YouTube, all that good stuff?
Yeah, you guys can find us at BTJ Pod on Twitter. And obviously, I'm the co-host of the Bring the Juice Colts podcast. You guys can listen to us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to us, we are on there. So I would appreciate if you guys would check us out.
Yeah, definitely go check them out and show them some support over on their channels all across, of course, social media. Appreciate you all tuning into this one, and we will talk to you very soon with a lot more content coming your way prior to Sunday Showdown. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.